Dawn on the prairie was a fragile thing, a whisper of light pushing back the dark. Rhett stood on his porch, a mug of coffee growing cold in his hand. He wasn't watching the sunrise. He was watching the dust. A small angry cloud rising on the horizon. 3 riders, moving fast. He'd been expecting them. For months he'd felt it in his bones. The past doesn't stay buried. It just waits. The screen door creaked open behind him. It was Clara, her hand resting protectively over the gentle curve of her belly, the new life they'd made together. Her voice was a hushed question. "Rhett, who are they?" He didn't turn, just kept his eyes fixed on the approaching figures. He took a slow breath, the cool morning air doing little to calm the storm in his chest. "Men from Fort Laramie. My father's men." Her face, usually so full of life, went pale. The hope they'd carefully built seemed to tremble in the air between them. "You sent him that letter, didn't you?" It wasn't an accusation, just a confirmation of a fear she'd held close. Rhett finally turned to her, his own fear mirrored in his eyes. He nodded. He needed to know I'm done hiding. By now, the riders were close enough to see clearly. The jingle of their spurs was a metallic threat on the wind. Their rifles held casually, but with deadly purpose across their saddles. The man in the lead was unmistakable. Captain Mason Carson, Rhett's father, grey-haired, with eyes as cold and hard as river stones. He wore the same dark blue uniform that had starred in Rhett's nightmares for years. A symbol of everything he had run from. The captain reined in his horse, just beyond the porch, his gaze sweeping over the small homestead with disdain. "Mr. Carson," he called out, his voice sharp and cutting, like a whip crack in the quiet morning. "I see you've been busy. Disobeying orders again." Rhett stepped off the porch, his boots sinking into the soft earth of the life he'd tried to build. He met his father's glare without flinching. "I quit obeying your orders the day you left a good man to die." A muscle twitched in the captain's jaw. That man made his own choices. "He was my friend." Rhett's voice cracked with a grief he'd carried for too long. "And you?" He struggled to control the rage, the betrayal. "You watched him bleed out because his name wasn't yours." Mason's cold gaze flickered past Rhett, landing on Clara, who stood frozen by the door. "So this is the widow," he sneered. "The one you've defiled in your guilt." Clara flinched as if struck. In a heartbeat, Rhett's hand was on the grip of his revolver. "You speak her name again, old man," he growled, "and I swear." "Enough," the captain snapped, cutting him off. His authority was absolute, ingrained from decades of command. "You will come back to the fort. Turn yourself in. The army still wants its deserter." Rhett let out a short, bitter laugh. It was a sound with no humor in it. "I'd rather hang on my own land than kneel on yours." With a final chilling glare, the captain and his men turned their horses and rode away, leaving a vow hanging in the air. They would be back. Later, as the sun climbed higher, Clara found Rhett by the barn, his head buried in his hands. The bravado from the morning was gone, replaced by a deep, weary dread. "He's not coming for justice," Rhett said, his voice muffled. "He's coming to erase what he did, to erase me." Clara knelt beside him, her presence a quiet strength. "Then we'll stand our ground, together." He looked up at her, his eyes full of a terrible conflict, love for her and fear for her. "You don't understand, Clara. If they find out you're carrying my child, they'll take you too. They'll call it treason, fraternizing with a deserter." Her chin lifted. Her voice when she spoke was as steady as the prairie horizon. "Then let them. I won't hide my child, or the man who saved me." In that moment, something inside Rhett that had been frozen for years began to thaw. It felt like hope, but it was raw and terrifying. A feeling he'd almost forgotten. He was no longer just a man running from his past. He was a man with a future to defend. That night, the wind howled. A lonely, mournful sound that bent the tall grass flat. Inside the small house, Rhett worked by the flickering glow of a single lantern, methodically loading his rifle. Each click of the mechanism was a period on a sentence he never wanted to write. Clara watched him from the shadows, her silence filled with unspoken fears. "You could run," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "We could go west, disappear." He paused, looking up at her, the lantern light carving shadows onto his determined face. "I've run enough," he said, his voice low and firm. "This land is ours now." She moved closer, stepping into the small circle of light. "It's not the land, Rhett. It's the life we built here. That's what matters." Her hand came up to brush his cheek, a touch so gentle it seemed to stop the world. For just a second, the fort, the war, his father, it all vanished. There was only the two of them, clinging to something real in the howling dark. Then, a sharp crack shattered the night. The lantern on the table exploded, plunging them into absolute blackness. Rhett reacted instantly, diving forward and pulling Clara down to the rough wooden floor. More gunfire erupted outside, the sound of splintering glass and the terrified screaming of horses. Through the broken window, they could see an orange glow. "They're here," Rhett hissed into the darkness. The barn went up first, a tower of flame roaring into the night sky. Shouted orders cut through the chaos as soldiers surrounded the house. There was no escape. Rhett dragged Clara toward the small trapdoor in the floor. "The root cellar, stay here. Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear." "No," she pleaded, her fingers digging into his arm. "They'll kill you. Don't leave me." He cupped her face, his thumb tracing her cheek one last time, and kissed her forehead. "I've faced death before," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But this time I have something to fight for." He climbed the ladder, pulled the heavy trapdoor shut behind him, and disappeared into the smoke and the gunfire. Clara was left alone in the cold, damp dark. Through the cracks in the floorboards above, she could see flashes of firelight. She heard the thunder of guns, the crash of furniture, the thud of heavy boots on the porch. Then, an awful, ringing silence. She pressed a hand over her belly, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, praying to a God she wasn't sure was listening. Minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity. Finally, a slow creak from above. The trapdoor opened. Rhett's face appeared in the dim light, his hair matted with sweat and soot, a dark stain of blood spreading across his shoulder. But his eyes were still burning with that fierce, protective fire. "It's over," he rasped. "They're gone, for now." Tears of relief spilled down her cheeks as she reached up for him. "Rhett, your arm." He managed a faint smile. "I've had worse." But as she helped him down the ladder, his knees buckled. He collapsed against her, the true depth of the wound revealing itself. By morning, the barn was just a blackened skeleton against a smoke-haze sky. The homestead was scarred, but standing. Clara had torn her own shawl to bind Rhett's wound, whispering prayers as he drifted in and out of a fevered sleep, murmuring names from his past. Eli, Father, Clara. When he finally opened his eyes for good, the sun was high. Clara was sitting beside him, her hand holding his. "You saved us," she said, her voice thick with emotion. He gave a weak, tired smile. "Not yet. He'll be back. Mason Carson doesn't lose twice." Clara gently brushed a stray tear from his cheek. "Then we'll be ready for him." As if on cue, the prairie wind carried a sound to them, The faint distant echo of hoofbeats. Farther away this time, but they would be back. Rhett stared toward the horizon, his eyes narrowing. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold resolve. Next time, he whispered, his voice gaining strength. I won't fight him with bullets. I'll fight him with the truth.